Welcome back, everybody. I'm hoping that you can all see me and hear me. So I'm hoping that you also had a really lovely lunch. We've managed to have a bit of a break and some lunch here in the Bridge Centre. So cracking off with the weekend, and it's a bit premature, isn't it? Cracking off the afternoon is Harriet, and Harriet's going to be talking to us about the role of music in the communication pyramid. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Harriet, and she's going to come to the stage.
Good afternoon, everybody. Lovely to be here today and lovely to see so many of you joining us as well. Okay, so just a little bit about kind of where I'm at and why I'm here today. So I've worked in music education for a long time now, and I moved into speech and language therapy more recently, and this was due to my passion for voice science and wanting to bring the worlds of music and science or healthcare closer together. And it was during my paediatric training that I noticed a commonality between the activities that therapists were using and those that we use in music education. And that really got me thinking, but more about that a little later. So while I was on placement, I was introduced to the communication pyramid, and this is used widely and can be found on the walls of many a speech and language clinic room. It's often given out as a resource to parents, to schools, practitioners, and you'll be able to find it very easily on many NHS websites as well. Now, the content of the pyramid is something that I received many a lecture on during my training, and I'm sure that many of you will be familiar with the terminology it uses. It maps out the development of language and the skills needed to aid that development. So let's have a little look at it. Oh, and this is where I need to work out how to move it on. Too many. There we go. So here we are. So a quick Google search, if you put in the communication pyramid into Google, you'll get lots and lots of different versions of this pyramid. Some have 5 layers, some have 6, some have more, and they present it, these layers in different order, so it's not necessarily what you see here. Most commonly, you'll see something like this, so something with attention, listening, play, comprehension, expression, and then speech sounds. Often those two might be switched around at the bottom, or they might sometimes even precurse that with interaction as well. There are different varieties, but they're all kind of following the same idea. So typically we see language development beginning with hearing and looking, listening and attention. And we can then look at those skills that come in after that. So turn taking, vocalizing, babbling. We might have things like joint attention. These are all terms that you will be familiar with as early years practitioners. And as the play skills develop, we then see situational understanding develop too. And that's when we get more pointing and gesturing and actions coming in, copying coming in. And this could also be where we also see, we have that copying of action, but also copying of sound as well. And from there, then we have that copying of words. And this all kind of then can almost like a snowball effect as everything develops. We begin to understand the words, and then we may move on to using symbolic noises. And then eventually we would see the use of single words, and then in bigger utterances, and then full sentences, and so on. Now, remember, though, that we are all unique, and that was a very kind of crude description, if you like, of how language develops. Actually, it's not just as simple as saying, well, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. But we can use the pyramid as a bit of a guide as to what to expect along the way. Now, as with many things, there is a danger of misinterpretation. And some people believe that in order to develop a particular layer of this pyramid, that they must be mastery of the preceding layer. And that's a necessary step in order to move on and grasp these concepts. And that's where we can get a little bit stuck with this idea. Because actually we know that skills develop and they evolve over time, and this is no different with communication and language skills either. So I want to present to you an alternative possibly. There we go. Okay, so here we have the communication tree. Okay, and as you can see, this one is from the Southwest Yorkshire NHS, and I came across this actually on their Twitter feed. And again, a quick Google search will give you a plethora of different versions of this. And again, each one has their own kind of unique kind of elements. They might have slightly different words or terminology being used, but essentially they're all kind of, you know, it's the same idea. And here, instead of the layers in this pyramid format, we actually see the layers as different parts of the tree. So on here we have, you know, we've got the roots, which is our attention and listening skills. It then divides it into lower trunk and upper trunk. So lower trunk being the play, interaction, upper trunk, understanding. We then have the branches and the leaves as the expressive language. And what's really lovely on here is the fruit is where our speech sounds come in, our voice quality and our fluency come into it. Now, what we do have on here, though, is two further features that we didn't see on the pyramid, and that is the rain and the sunshine. And the sunshine represents the opportunities to communicate, because actually without those opportunities, how are we going to develop those skills? And the rain is the adult interaction. And, you know, it's a really lovely analogy, you know, quite literally, without rain, without sun, the tree wouldn't grow, the tree wouldn't develop. The other reason why I like this representation of language is that each part of the tree continues to grow, even the roots. And so as practitioners, we mustn't forget that. Just because a child has good expressive language, it doesn't mean that they no longer have to work on attention and listening skills. All of these areas will still continue to develop and to continue to grow. So moving on. So the power of music. What has music got to do with all this? Well, this comes back to what I said at the start, that during my paediatric placements, I would observe therapy sessions, intervention sessions in clinics and in schools, in nursery settings. And I would sit there thinking, I do these activities when I'm teaching music as a music teacher, as a music practitioner. And it was really that kind of made me think, actually, the connection between these two things is far greater than I think we realize or we give justice to. So in order for us to learn any language, it's really important that we're able to process the sounds that we hear. And the auditory process required to coordinate that, you know, there's lots of things coordinating, several different types of information needed for that to happen. And these include vibration, sound, rhythm, timing, and orientation. And these are all terms that we also use in music. They're associated with music as well. And that's quite obvious, really, when we think about it like that. And it really goes to show just how important music is to language and communication development. So as we've heard already from our wonderful speakers that we've heard from today, and those that you're going to hear shortly as well, a strong music curriculum in place can really feed into all areas of development. So if we think about for a moment the early learning goals and the EYFS framework and those 7 different areas that are broken down, actually music can feed into all of that. You know, we can make those links. We've seen how some of those links already happen today. So if we think about the power of music again, so I want you to think about now, and you can put your ideas in the chat if you like. I want you to think about, how do young children use music? And this is, you know, we've had some of this conversation this morning as well. What can it bring them? And what different things does it provide? What are the benefits of music for children? And while you consider that, I'm going to just come out of here for a moment. I'm going to share a video with you. So bear with me while I stop sharing so that I can then share a video with you. So bear with me a moment. Click, 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 click. If I go in there, we'll see how this works. So have a listen.
Sorry.
Oh, no, you can't see that, can you? Let me try that again. Let me load that up. Here we go. So have a little think about those things as we have a little listen and a watch of this.
Sorry. Beautiful. Oh, oh. Oh, very nice. That was very good. Oh, Teddy. Ah, cuddle. Cuddle with rabbit. Ah, cuddle with rabbit. Cuddle with Teddy as well. Ah, cute. Do you want to cuddle with this rabbit too?
Oh, Cornelia.
It's enough cuddling. What's that? Hit with it. Okay. Let go. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Oh.
So there you go. So just while I get the other screen back up, please pop into the chat. What types of things were you seeing there in terms of language and communication? What was going on? And while I faff with tech, that will give you a moment to pop those things into the chat. Yeah, great things coming through. Eye contact, smiling, turn taking. So, we've got those elements there already from those lower parts of the tree, from the roots and from the lower trunk. Friendship, communication, enjoyment sharing. Yeah, a real kind of bond there as well. Use of voice. And there was a great conversation. There were no words involved from the child's point of view, but there was still a great conversation going on there. Music is confidence building. It helps children to be expressive, creative, use their imaginations, communicate more effectively, understanding. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Great things in the chat here. Really, really super. Brilliant. Yeah, and I must say that little clip actually was a little clip. It was actually from a much bigger thing. There was 20 minutes of music making going on. And it was my little boy a long time ago now, and we couldn't quite believe how long. We've got click the camera, we click go. We thought it would be 30 seconds or something before we got bored and moved on. And actually, it ended up being this 20-minute interaction with the glockenspiel, and at such a young age as well. But thinking about what that was doing in terms of the communication and the opportunities that that's providing for communication and therefore language development only goes to show what potential we have there. So we click on, there we go. So music for young children and babies. So some of these things have come through and we've talked about them earlier today as well. So relaxation, stimulation, imagination, entertainment, we can see what's there. And we saw even some of those examples in that clip just before. So I'm sure you'll agree that actually these are beneficial, not just for children, but actually for all of us at any age. I think we can relate to all of those aspects that we see there on the screen. And I'm going to digress momentarily to the other side of speech and language therapy. So we have pediatrics and then the work that we do in adults as well. And for those people with Parkinson's or dementia, those recovering from stroke and brain injury, the power of music is just as great. And we see the positive impact that it can have on all of the things listed here. And I'll tell you quickly, I met a lady and she'd suffered from a stroke and she found it very difficult to speak. She had a difficulty finding the right words to use, kind of recalling the right word, tended to use a lot of single words in conversation, would often stutter and stammer over those words. It wasn't fluent speaking. And in our conversation, she said, I sing you opera. And she launched into this most wonderful performance of Summertime by Gershwin. And it was faultless. It was an absolutely stunning performance of it. And you would never have known from her singing that she had the difficulties she now presented with following her stroke and those problems that, you know, affected and impacted on her language and communication. She'd actually been a professional opera singer. And it goes to show really how powerful that connection music has, especially that connection that music has with the brain, which is a whole other presentation and not one that we can go into in any great detail now. So going back to our list then, there's a wealth of literature that has researched and investigated these benefits and the benefits that music can have on these things. So I'm going to streamline my talking and bring it back to language and communication. I'm going to reframe the heading here. So we've got using music to develop language and communication skills. And I'm going to turn that into a question quite simply by putting why before it. Why use music to develop language and communication skills? And actually, I think you already know the answer to this. We've already heard some fantastic examples of this this morning already, and lots more to come. Now, for me, music is a universal language. It's a form of expression, and it's something that can be accessed by all, and it appears in all cultures and society. And it's something that we all have in common in one form or another. So if you like, it unifies us as a global society of musicians. Music can provide a means of language and communication for children. And before children learn to speak, music can help to train their listening skills. And through listening, children are able to imitate those sounds that they hear in order to produce language of their own. And I've got another lovely example of this. Again, it's another one from my little boy. And he was actually, he was a late talker, as you might say. He had an expressive language delay. So we didn't get a lot from him for a long time, not of spoken words. We had a lot of everything else, but not of spoken language. But this is what we had lots and lots of. So let me share this one with you now. We can click in the right places.
Sorry.
The wrong one, get rid of that one. Here we go. You can sing the pirate song?
Yeah. On the door, the picture, I go, on the door, I go, but the Annie, and Annie. Annie, on the veil, Annie, let the veil, go. Go, who do you pull who pump, and they know a flunk, and they roll away on the tail, go, who you, go, hey, go, and they roll on the flock, tick tock, click, slap, slack.
And it goes on and on, so I'll stop it there. So you can see, you know, there's not he hadn't got much grasp of words and speaking as we know. We heard a few responses. He said yes. We got something that sounded like "Where's Andy?" But actually that was, you know, probably the kind of limit of his language at that age. And for him, music and singing provided him with a way to communicate. And we can see there that was his own language. We got some symbolic noises in there. We could hear at the end there, he was doing tick tock kind of appeared in there. And for him, that made perfect sense. That was completely normal. He knew what he was singing about. He was, you know, performing on his step as well, and his end of a trumpet, using it as a megaphone as well. And, you know, just a really lovely example of that idea of using sounds and developing those sounds and those musical opportunities as a means to speak. So, and again, before many children can speak, they often are singing. And it's the same, it was exactly the same with my little boy. So, you know, there was a lovely example of it there. But he was able to complete a line of a song, and that could be, you know, quite a long utterance, way before he was able to actually use those bigger utterances in conversation. And of course, any type of singing is going to develop those vocalization skills. And so again, just want to share with you one more video. This is the last one, but again, just another example of how and why it is so important to encourage this. And again, so what I'm going to share with you is was before he had big utterances, he was still kind of using one word responses, maybe two connecting words. Really, he should have been talking a lot more fluently than he was, but he was able to do this.
Dumpty dumpty, right, we'll have dumpty dumpty then. After three. 1, 2, 3.
Bravo!
I don't know where he's got this idea that he needs to be on a stage in order to perform these things, but it's, I mean, probably from watching me or his childhood be on a stage, perhaps. But again, and you might think, oh yeah, well, all children do that, but he wasn't talking. The most we got from him was single word responses, or a couple of words maybe, but yet he could do that. And that just goes to show, you know, how valuable it is. Okay, so let me get this one back up. Now, for some children, like those with profound and complex needs or non-verbal children, like I say, music is providing those opportunities as an alternative way to express themselves. And let me click on, here we go. So there have been a number of studies that explore the impact of musical activities on the development of children. And there is really strong evidence that supports the idea that regular music activity can support, it does support the development and their understanding. And one such study is this one here that I've just bullet pointed these points here from Taylor and Clark. And it explored the impact of musical activities on the development of preschool age children over a 3-year period. And here are some of the positive findings from that study. So one of the things they were looking at was to see whether or not engaging in musical activities would improve literacy skills. And if we think back to that pyramid, you'll often find a version, you can find a version, it is out there, of an extra layer on top above the speech sounds for literacy. And if you think about it logically, that would be that next step, if you like, up there. And we can see from the findings here, I won't read them out now, but they found that indeed it did have a positive effect. So how do we achieve this? Well, great, we've got the evidence. We know that music is fantastic. And actually, I think you already know how we achieve this because we've seen wonderful examples of this already today. I know that you'll be doing it in your own settings as well. I'm sure you're doing a fantastic job of helping to bring and raise awareness to the activities that you've got and that you're doing. But I mapped it onto my very own tree. So I really like that tree analogy. I think it's a great analogy to have. And this is very much a starting point. You know, this is very much a live document, and it most certainly is not complete, but it really helped me to think about, you know, we've got that tree or our pyramid, we've got those headings, we've got those ideas. So now how do the musical activities that we do in our settings, how do they pin onto that tree? Where do they fit in? And if you like, you know, you can consider this as a sapling, and it's, you know, there's lots more to add to it and develop. You know, you could even sketch one of these out quickly now. So you can see that the musical skills map onto the tree very easily. And I find that the area people have the most trouble with is probably the comprehension parts, which here is represented as the upper trunk, the receptive language or the understanding. And this is where things like activities that involve following instructions or, you know, having to understand words, finding objects when you name them, things like that. Those are the things that would build into that area. So have a little think now as I'm wittering on. I want you to think about, well, what things do you do already and how do they map onto the tree? You could even sketch a little tree out and start putting, you know, put the title of the activity at top and put where we have, you know, where those things feed in. I'll go through a couple of examples with you. So we could, for example, we've got a game, a song that involves use of the tune of London Bridge is Falling Down, and everyone would have an instrument and they would, we would sing along, everybody play with me, play with me, play with me, everybody play with me, ready, steady, stop. So we've got that instruction in there where they would then rest their instruments. And you can do so much with that. So thinking about, you know, that understanding element, well, even attention and listening, you've got things in there that, you know, they've got to be listening out for that instruction. Are they playing in time? You can encourage them to beat their instruments, tap their instruments in time. That's feeding into that attention and listening. You can take that anywhere we want. So you could do, Sophie, will you play with me? So you're getting that eye contact, that turn taking, that conversation. You can build that in. You can also then bring in other words, verbs and adjectives as well. So everyone play quietly, or everyone play louder now. So you can begin to, you know, bring in lots of descriptive language to help develop their understanding. And then we can clearly see where these things are going to map on everywhere else as well. I'm going to move on. There's lots of other ideas that we can share, and perhaps if you want any more ideas about that, then we can chat about them at the end of the day. Darwin suggested that music and language evolve together, and there is certainly good reason to think that this is the case. So music is innate in us all, and we're kept alive, in fact, by the rhythm of our heartbeats. And our natural response as adults when we hold a baby is to rock them back and forth. So rhythm has a really important role to play, I think, in what we do. I think it was mentioned this morning about in those first conversations that we have with babies, we use that motherese, that sing-songy voice, that cooing voice that we use with babies. And so again, straight away, we've got that use of higher pitch, that sweeter quality, and it's often slower as well. And that sing-song voice is a really great way for straight away for babies to be able to pick up on language more easily. So I know some people can often frown upon it and think, no, we should be using adult language to model, but actually it does have its place, and you know, we can still use that. I thought this quote was particularly lovely, and I think I'd go one step further than this and say that it's not children's natural musical behaviour, but in fact their behaviour is naturally musical. So again, I'm turning it on its head. And if we begin to consider our interactions and observations with children in this way, you'll notice how powerful that role of music is. So I'm going to leave you with a challenge. And here's the challenge. in your settings, I want you to see what happens. See what happens if you use every intention to communicate as a musical intention. And you could also do that the other way around as well. Treat every musical interaction made by a child as an interaction to communicate. And Di gave a lovely example of this earlier in her session. So the child who was there with their sticks, they weren't joining in with the singing, sat rubbing their sticks quietly to themselves. Di interpreted that as a musical intention and thus giving the child the opportunity to engage in music making. And in the last 20 seconds, I'm going to give you another example of that I heard of. It was a study that looked at this very thing. And they said that the parents had got the child in the high chair, the child was waiting for their dinner and they were banging away with their knife and fork. And now normally that parent would have scolded the child and told them to stop. They would have seen that as negative, as bad behavior, whereas the parent went, completely flipped the situation, and on this occasion went, wow, that's great, what great music, and responded by clapping the rhythm back to the child. And they continued that interaction and that musical dialogue for a few minutes. So that's the whole scenario that would normally end negatively was turned into a positive one. And there we've got another brilliant example of music providing that much better opportunity to communicate. And here's my final slide. I'm going to leave you with this today. A reminder that you are the sun and rain, and we need these in order for communication tree to grow. And there's no better way of doing this than through music. There we go.
Thank you, Harriet. That was absolutely brilliant. I loved the videos of your child there. It was just absolutely delightful. There will be opportunities to ask Harriet some more questions later on when we do our question and answer section. But what I'm going to do now is we're going to move along, and I'm going to introduce Angela Barker, who's another member of the Soundpots team and works